Hello. This time I want to talk about adverbs in modern Greek, especially about the way we form them. But also before that, I would like to start by explaining a bit what are adverbs, because often it's a category of words that people have a bit more difficulty to grasp than, say, nouns or verbs. Okay, there is a way to explain what adverbs are by example, let's say, which is the most straightforward way, by saying, adverbs are words like well, highly, exactly, directly. He told me directly the truth. So very often if you explain this to people, they understand more or less what you look for in Greek, and the problem is solved. However, we can try to have a more kind of theoretical explanation. I wouldn't call it definition, but a kind of explanation of what adverbs are. So adverbs describe or modify, like add an additional meaning, it's a different way to say modify, other words in a phrase, right? But not adjectives. So they can modify a whole phrase, they can modify an adjective, and very often they modify verbs, but not adjectives. And the reason this happens is that adverbs have to verbs a relation very similar to the relation that adjectives have to nouns. Now, let's have two examples here. The first will be with an adjective, and the second will be with an adverb. Ο Κώστας είναι γρήγορος. Okay, that's with an adjective. Γρήγορος is an adjective. Ο Κώστας τρέχει γρήγορα. That's with an adverb. Γρήγορος is the adjective. Γρήγορα is the adverb. Notice that I'm saying more or less the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, but the meaning is very, very closely related. Another example. Ο Πέτρος έκανε ένα ψηλό άλμα. This is how I can say this with an adjective. Now, with an adverb, ο Πέτρος πήδηξε ψηλά. So, I use the word ψηλά to, modify. The grammar book, we call this modify, to sort of, instead of saying modify, which is a kind of fancy word, we're going to say to specify the meaning, to make more exact the meaning of the word πήδηξε. How exactly did he do that? Was it a high jump, a low jump, a quick jump, a strong jump? That's what it's doing here. Think of what an adjective can do with a noun. Like, I have a noun like window, and then I can use all kinds of adjectives to describe this window. Like I say, it's big, glass, expensive, whatever. I can do the same thing with a verb when I'm using an adverb. Okay, now let's have a last example to get an idea of what kind of words we're dealing with when we have adverbs. Η Μαρία μίλησε με όμορφο τρόπο. Η Μαρία μίλησε όμορφα. So I can say όμορφα, or I can use an expression, με όμορφο τρόπο. 3 words, starting with preposition. Now, this με όμορφο τρόπο, in grammatical jargon, would be called adverbial phrase. It means it's an adverb, but instead of being a singular word, it's composed of a number of words. And this happens a lot. Okay, I can say του φέρθηκε άσχημα, του φέρθηκε με άσχημο τρόπο. Μίλησε ευγενικά, μίλησε με ευγένεια. Okay. So this is about what adverbs are, the more theoretical part of what I'm going to talk about today. Now, let's have a look at how I form them. The first thing to say here is that most adverbs are derived from adjectives. They are adjectives with a different ending. That would be one thing here, okay? And which again reinforces the earlier idea we had that adjectives and adverbs are sort of connected. However, if we look at the most commonly used adverbs, and this is something you'll find also when you look at the most commonly used verbs, which are irregular, the most commonly used adverbs, many of them are not derived from adjectives, but have different etymologies. Sometimes they're just words which have been preserved through time, like prin. Okay, like this prin is just an ancient word which is still used today and is not derived from an adjective. Another example will be Tora. Now, Tora has a very interesting etymology. Tora means now, right? Tora comes from a much earlier Greek expression, tiora tafti. Tiora, that would be a dative. And with drop tafti, we kept just tiora in this time. This is what it means. And tiora became Tora, became shorter. And now we just write it as one word, but it really comes from 3 or 2 words, depending on how you count, whether you include tafti or not. Okay, so just be aware of this. We have many words, like most adjectives in terms of numbers, most adverbs, I'm sorry, in terms of numbers, they come from adjectives. But if you look among the most commonly used adverbs, there are many which do not come from adjectives. Other example would be σήμερα, which has an etymology very similar to τώρα. Εδώ, εκεί, okay, these words, πουθενά, these words do not come from adjectives. Okay. Now, in terms of formation, there are 2 very large groups. First of all, there is a group that have the ending in a. Okay, for instance, we have the adjective γρήγορος and the adverb γρήγορα. Ψηλός, ψηλά. Κοντός, κοντά. Also, well, we have τεμπέλης, τεμπέλικα. Now, which are the words that have this ending in a? It would be the adjectives that end in os, like γρήγορος, κοντός, ακριβώς, ωραίος, μοιραίος, okay? Then adjectives that are in is with y, like παχής. Not a very big group, but keep this in mind, maybe handy at some point. I doubt it, but for reasons of including everything here, let's add this too. And finally, is with ita, like τεμπέλης. Again, a rather small group. Okay, the really big group here, the one thing I would try to keep in mind if I was approaching this from a learner's point of view would be the words inos. And in this case, in adverbs that end with a, the adverb is always identical to the neuter plural, nominative or accusative, right? So, τεμπέλικα would be my adverb, but it would also be the adjective in the neuter plural. For instance, τεμπέλικα παιδιά. Okay. Now, this group is seen as a bit more informal. The next group we're going to see with os written with omega, not omicron, is seen as a bit more formal. This group of adverbs usually come from adjectives in is, s in the neuter, is in the masculine and feminine, s in the neuter, like διεθνής, διεθνές, διαρκής, διαρκές, συνεπής, συνεπές, etc. So how will it be? Διεθνής, διεθνώς, διαρκής, διαρκώς, συνεχής, συνεχώς. These are a bit more formal. We might use them a bit less. Well, we use them in oral speech a lot, but they might sound slightly more formal. Just keep this in mind. And finally, some words, some adjectives in os have both forms. So to rephrase this to make it more understandable, adjectives in os that have an adverb always have the adverb in a, but some of those that have the adverb in a also have a second form in os. You will not find the opposite, having only the form in os but not in a. But some have only a and some have both os and a. For instance, άδικα, αδίκως. Note the difference in the stress. Okay, the words in os will have the stress in a different syllable. The adjective will be άδικος and the adverb will be αδίκος. The adjective will be άσχετος, then my adverb will be in a, άσχετα, and the adverb moves the stress, ασχέτως, moves the stress to the right. When in cases where I have both, yes, now very clearly the one in os is more formal. We tend to use it more in written speech, and the one in I is more kind of informal. Now, if you open up some grammar books and dictionaries, they might have detailed explanations claiming that these two adverbs with the different endings do not mean the same thing, but there's a slight difference in meaning. This is fine. I mean, okay, personally, I try to be aware of these rules whenever they exist. But keep in mind that sometimes they tend to split hair in these cases. So once I upload the video, I will also try to provide some notes to facilitate people who want to follow this by looking also at some information. That's it. Thank you very much.